be assured of this. Even if we don't know how he's using different events and activities and people in our lives. When we first meet Naomi in the book of Ruth, she's married and has 2 sons. By the end of the first chapter, those 3 men are dead. By the end of the first chapter, she's returned to Bethlehem only with a stubborn Moabite daughter-in-law after spending 10 years in Moab. Naomi has no idea what God has in store for her, and during her lifetime, she never sees the full extent of the blessings that God was working in and through her. God's not compelled to show believers the full extent of his plans. I'll say that again. God is not compelled to show us the big picture of what he's doing specifically in our lives. Rather, he calls on his people to trust in him as he leads them through such difficult times. Naomi had a truly terrible stretch of time in Moab. The whole time probably wasn't terrible. We see that she had a good relationship with her daughters-in-law. But the time is bookended by the death of her husband and the deaths of her son. She's quite shaken, even to the point of telling Orpah and Ruth, it's better if they're not around her. Think the person who's already experienced times of devastation. Thus the lightning illustration. It's a storm. You don't want to be near me. Much more heavy than that. Now Naomi is telling her 2 loving daughters-in-law, don't be near me. This story shows us that other believers have had to face times of suffering, being confronted with the task of trusting in God's providence, even if that means believing that God in his wisdom has allowed those things to happen. Others have gone through these times of difficulty before. So I know we read the whole book of Ruth last time, but I just find a lot of value in reading our text before going through it. So I'd like to read Ruth chapter 1 once again. You're welcome to follow along or just listen as I read. Ruth chapter 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man named of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way. For I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her. They returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. In Ruth 1, we see this theme. Trusting in God's providence means accepting times of suffering from His hand. Trusting in God's providence means accepting times of suffering from His hand. Naomi does not do this perfectly. She doesn't. There are ways that we see her failure in this chapter. But even from her imperfect example, we have much to learn. And beyond her, we have an advantage that she did not have. We can see more of what God is doing through her, especially at the end of the book. We see after her time, God brought along this boy named David. And we see more of what God was doing through her line. She didn't see that. But this is helpful, and we're focusing on it because just as Naomi, we are actually the ones sometimes that are experiencing suffering, and we don't see that kind of picture either. We can look to the Word, we can see what God is doing ultimately through His people. We can see what God will accomplish as the world continues, but we don't know either what God might do through us through particular times of suffering. So there is great value in seeing Naomi's example and learning about God as well through this chapter. To help us consider this passage, there's 4 different sections of chapter 1. First, in verses 1 through 5, we see an unexpected destination. The second section is a broken plea. The third is a tenacious confession. That's where Ruth makes a wonderful statement. And then the end of the chapter, an empty return. So the first 5 verses, an unexpected destination. As we covered last week, when God brought a famine to the land of Israel during the time of the Judges, which was before the kings like Saul and David and Solomon, a certain family in Bethlehem decided to leave and go to Moab. They left a place that normally had food and different kinds of food, Bethlehem, the house of bread, and they went to be strangers in a foreign land. Maybe strangers had some protection in Moab, but they didn't have, it's not like they were walking into abundance. Life would not have been easy for them as they went there. Now, maybe we ask, why Moab? Why would they go there? And apparently from Bethlehem, it was even possible to see the land of Moab. Only about 50 miles away. And while these two places were close together, it was possible in that region, with that geography, that Moab had received more rain than Israel had. And of course, if that's what God was doing to punish the people of Israel, we can understand why they would have had famine, but God was not necessarily doing that to other nations at the time. So Moab had food, they went there. But Moab was not a friendly nation to Israel. Can you remember some of the things that happened between these two countries? Moab refused to allow Israel to pass through their country as Israel was in their time of wandering through the wilderness. The Moabites were not allowed, after that, the Moabites were not allowed to enter the assembly of Israel. Before Israel crossed the Jordan River to enter into the Promised Land and to start to take possession of that land, Moabite women came over and enticed many of the Israelite men to commit immorality. And even closer to the time of Naomi, there was a period of 18 years when Moab oppressed Israel until at the end, Ehud went through this left-handed guy. I'm glad we have some representation in the Bible. Left-handed man goes in and kills the king of Moab and liberates Israel. So even in recent times, these nations were not on friendly terms. Yet off they go, Elimelech, Naomi, and their 2 sons. And we're not told a specific time frame, but it seems like towards the beginning of that 10 years is when Elimelech dies. 2 sons get married, and at the end of that 10 years, it seems, is when those 2 men die. So now, this unexpected destination for Naomi is being in a foreign land. No husband, no sons, no grandchildren. The only relatives that she has with her are 2 foreign daughters-in-law. Naomi hadn't planned to end up like this, but by this time she should have had some grandchildren to be rejoicing with. She'd left relationships behind in Bethlehem. So even her, maybe people she had grown up with and known for many years, they weren't even around. She'd buried 3 men in a foreign land. Now we don't know, as I said last week, we don't know who made the call for the family to leave Israel during the time of famine. Maybe it was purely Elimelech that said, I need to leave my family out. Maybe it was a combination, both of them, or maybe Naomi was the one pushing for it to happen. We don't know. But they really didn't expect their choice to end up like this. We don't plan on our choices ending up like this either. And yet, inevitably, in some way, suffering comes. What does all this do to Naomi? What would it do to you to lose family like this? Maybe you have experienced this kind of loss. But we have a window into her grief as we continue through chapter 1. That's where we get to her broken plea, verses 6 through 14. The next section contains questions that we need to work through. But let's start by trying to understand what exactly is going on. Naomi starts returning to Israel. That's a good thing. And her 2 daughters-in-law start to go with her. It's during this journey that Naomi starts to plead with the other ladies to go back home. So for some reason, again, this is not stated or explained, for some reason, the 3 of them start going. I don't know if Naomi changed her mind partway through, or if she knew what she was doing and she just wanted to have this conversation away from where they had been living. Either way, partway through the journey, before they arrive at their destination, Bethlehem, she starts to talk to them. But we don't want to miss in verse 6 the reason for her return. So she arises with her daughters-in-law to return. For she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. The time of famine was over. Her land once again was experiencing the kind of harvests that they needed to sustain life. You're going to see a word pop up repeatedly in Ruth 1. Maybe you noticed it already, and it's the word return. Verse 6. She rose to return. You see it later on as well, verse 7. When they were on the way to return. Keep your eyes out, it's later on too. Verse 10 even, you have a different form or a different purpose for the word. When Naomi is telling the 2 ladies, or when they answer her, no, we will return with you to your people. So we don't want to go back to where we used to live. We want to be the ones that are returning with you. So it just keeps happening as you watch through the end of the chapter. And this word return is significant. Thinking of famine and God's people returning, Amos 4, 6 through 8, this is a time later when a prophet is speaking to the northern kingdom of Israel. I gave you, this is God's message, I gave you cleanness of teeth in all your cities and lack of bread in all your places. Yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. Now, clean teeth are good, but this is expressing the idea that they didn't have food to eat. I also withheld the rain from you. When there were yet 3 months to the harvest, I would send rain on one city and send no rain on another city. One field would have rain, and the field on which it did not rain would wither. So 2 or 3 cities would wander to another city to drink and would not be satisfied. Yet you did not return to me. So 2 times in this passage, God is giving this message to the northern Israelites. I did this, yet you did not return. Seems to be founded in a passage in Deuteronomy 30:1-3. After describing the blessings for obedience to God and the curse for disobeying Him, Moses says, "And when all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before you, and you call them to mind among all the nations where the Lord your God has driven you, and return to the Lord your God, you and your children, and obey His voice in all that I command you today, with all your heart and with all your soul, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have mercy on you, and He will gather you again from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you." So God has instructed them. When they turn from Him, He will bring along times of misery, times of famine, times of foreign invasion and deportation. And what does He call them to do? Return. So I think it's significant here that we see Naomi actually returning. And we could question that and say, well, she's only returning because there's food there. She went to Moab for food, she's returning for food. But I just see too much in the Old Testament showing that returning for the people of Israel was an act of faith, an act of obedience. And we'll see as we continue and we look at Naomi's words, while there is a mixture and she's not thinking correctly through all of this, there is a foundation of faith there. I believe her act of returning is an act of returning to God. As the women travel to Israel, Naomi has some weighty things to say to Orpah and Ruth. And simply put, she tells them, "Go return each of you to her mother's house." But she doesn't just push them away, she also tries to send them away with a blessing. So verse 8, "May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me." Verse 9, "The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." So she wants life to be good for them. She calls for God to bless them. She desires that the one true God, the God of Israel, bless these foreign ladies as they return to their native land. They show kindness to her family, and she longs for God to show kindness to them. But the word for kindly here, in verse 8, "The Lord deal kindly with you." This is a theologically loaded term. It conveys the idea of steadfast love or loyalty, a kindness or favor that is consistent and dependable. It happens only a few times in Ruth, but they're significant times. So these ladies have shown steadfast love. They have shown loyalty to her family. We should be encouraged that Naomi desires for God to show such care to these two ladies. I think she's rightly understanding that it's God who blesses in this way. And she shows that she believes God does show love towards people. So she has not given up on God's kindness. Maybe God's kindness towards her, that's a problem. But she has not given up on the concept of God showing loyalty and steadfast love towards people. And as we continue on what she says here, she desires for them to find rest. What is the rest that she wants them to find? Well, the phrase right after that, verse 9, "Each of you in the house of her husband." So she's longing for them to be able to find other husbands and not stay in a state of widowhood. As she completes her blessing, the ladies cry together. So I don't think it's a long shot for us to understand here that there was good relationships between them. They were close. And perhaps the suffering that they had all experienced had only brought them closer together, as each of them had lost a husband. After blessing them, after saying she wants them to get married again, she makes it very clear that she sees no way that she can provide husbands for them. And to make that point very plain, she goes on into this explanation. Well, why would you turn back to be with me? Why would you be with me, daughters? No, turn back. Go away from me. I can't provide you husbands. And so she goes into this explanation of saying, even if I basically could get pregnant tonight, would you really wait for those boys to grow up to marry them? No, that's really an absurd idea. Realistic Conservative estimates put Naomi at about the age of 50 by this time. So all three ladies know that that's not an option. She cannot provide husbands for them. And what's the underlying message there? If you return to me, you will stay as a widow. That's her point through this. And she does not want that to take place. Her words show she's given up on the possibility of having grandchildren. Her husband's line would not continue. So she's genuinely wanting them to return to Israel. But do we agree with her conclusion? There's some things here that just don't line up with what we'd expect from a typical Old Testament believer. Why is Naomi wanting to return to people that does not honor God? Why not bring them back with her? Right? Be in the place where God is among his people. Why chase them away? Verse 13 is important. Would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for, let's see her reasoning here, for it is exceedingly better to me, for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. What does this statement reveal? I think first we shouldn't miss that she believed God was in control. Let's at least see that positive thing here. She does believe that God is in control of what has happened to her. It does show faith on her part. Second, this statement is amazingly similar to one that Job himself made to his friends. In Job 19:21, he says, "Have mercy on me. Have mercy on me, O you my friends, for the hand of God has touched me." Very similar to what Naomi is saying. Here are two people in the Old Testament who experienced devastating loss. And they believed that that loss came from God himself. Because of what God had done, she believed that God was against her. Because of that belief, it was better for her to consider her own losses and how much those losses from God's hand hurt these two ladies. Are you following the reasoning here? She believes that God did these things. Therefore, God is against her. Well, that's a mistake, but that's what she's believing. Therefore, since God is against her, these two ladies, by being near to her, have been hurt as well. That's the reasoning that is expressed in this text. Therefore, she's making all kinds of conclusions here, but we do the same. Therefore, because of these things, it was better for these two ladies to go back to a foreign land than to stay near her. It was better for them to leave a land where at least some people worship the true God and go to a land that worshiped false gods. It was better for them to do that than to stay around her. Wow. That's wrong. But it expresses the pain of a hurting heart. What a mixture of emotions and beliefs. Now the book sufficiently shows, as we go through it, you will see God is not against Naomi. That's a wrong conclusion. But we should see here as well the depth of pain and grief that her statements reveal. She is one hurting lady. A widow, a mother who has had to bury her sons. Her faith was still in place. She desired good for others, but she shows no hope in God being kind towards her. No hope in God's kindness towards her. If anything, she seems resigned. And so she's trying to chase away people that love her. Do such conclusions strike a chord in your heart? Have you been tempted to believe that God's hand is against you? You cling to your belief in God, knowing He's sovereign over all things. But what your suffering or the suffering of those close to you shakes your faith. Not in God's control, but in His steadfast love towards His people, and specifically towards you. If that resonates with you, then I encourage you to watch closely as we walk our way through this book. See God's care for this grieving widow. Pain is not the end of the road for her. After another crying session between these three ladies, Orpah leaves. She's never heard from again. She's off the scene. But Ruth clings to her. Cling is a word that shows a strong level of commitment to Naomi, while Ruth separates from all that she knew in Moab. She's leaving family behind. She's leaving her history behind. And she's clinging to this lady. And that brings us to her tenacious confession. Verses 15 through 18. Now at this point, Naomi has convinced Orpah to turn back. And now she directs her gaze and levels her plea at Ruth specifically. Return after your sister-in-law. That part's not shocking. She's been saying that. But the rest of what she says is shocking. See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. Naomi is basically saying, go back to your false gods. That is shocking to hear. Is she actually encouraging someone to continue or to resume false worship? And this is where understanding verse 13, I think, is so significant. In Naomi's mind, wrong thinking again, but in Naomi's mind, it was better for Ruth to be apart from her than with her. Since God was against Naomi, as she thought, then these ladies should not stay around her, even if that meant going back to a land that worshipped false gods. Naomi didn't want to bring any more pain into the lives of these two women. So right or wrong, she felt responsible for these women and wanted life to be better for them. See the danger of what accepting lies into our own lives, how that can affect others around us. That's a dangerous thing. Now, God doesn't give Naomi reasons for why she had to experience such loss, but He does have a blessing for her in what's taking place. She doesn't see it, but there is a blessing here. Ruth's response, one of the best confessions of faith in the Old Testament, stops Naomi's plea and changes her plan to return alone to Israel. Now, the core statement that Ruth makes here, she makes several, but the core of her statement, the middle of it, the center of it, the highlight of it, is when she says, your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. This is a statement of faith on Naomi's part. On Ruth's part, excuse me. Ruth chose to believe in the same God. So, whatever is happening here, in order for her to believe in the true God, she's saying, your God will be my God. Ruth knows that Naomi's God is the God of Israel. So somehow, Naomi's faith had been present. Even if it was damaged, it was still there. And Ruth is saying, I want that God. So there's still something right in Naomi's life, even if there were points of compromise that had been taking place. Maybe I need to convince you that this was a statement of faith. That you can turn over to Ruth 2:12, as Boaz says to Ruth, the Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Very strong statement of what he had seen in Ruth's life. She was known as one who had come to take refuge underneath the God of Israel. We see similar language in Leviticus 26:12, and I will walk among you and be your God, and you shall be my people. So when she says, your God shall be my God, your people my people. This is lining up with language that God himself had used in Leviticus 26:12. Even going to the New Testament, 1 Thessalonians 1:9. As Paul says to the Thessalonians, they themselves report concerning us the kind of reception we had among you, and how you turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God. So this language of making Naomi's God her God was showing that she was turning from the false gods that she had been raised to fear and to serve. Sometimes we look for cookie cutter type statements, and we're thrown off when we don't see the exact words that we are looking for. But the case is very strong that Ruth became a true believer. And her actions bear that out in the rest of the book. Are you here to consider turning back to God, turning to God in faith and trusting in Jesus' death on the cross, turning from your sin and turning to Christ, but you hold back because of other allegiances? Family can be a strong tie. History can be a strong tie. Work. Many reasons that we can put not to turn to God in faith. This is just one example. Consider Luke 18:29-30, where Jesus says, truly I say to you, there is no one who has left house or wife or brothers or parents or children for the sake of the kingdom of God, who will not receive many times more in this time and in the age to come eternal life. Ruth left behind all that she knew except for Naomi. She gave up much. But the message that Jesus gives is, even as you do that, even as you leave behind family, you receive in this time, in this life, many times more. And we can bear witness to that, the special fellowship that we have in the family of God. Those that leave behind family, or that have to say goodbye to family, and yet have family. There's an automatic connection in the body of Christ. Well, in the Old Testament time, as Ruth left her family and her country, there were believers that she got to know as she came back. At least one. That was Boaz, and I think she would definitely do that again. Number 4, an empty return. Last few verses of the chapter. So after this intense conversation, they both continue and they arrive at Bethlehem. Their arrival is, of course, noticed. Now, I don't know what kind of reputation Naomi and Elimelech had before. Elimelech, my God is king. Naomi is pleasant. Maybe this couple was a highly respected couple before they left Bethlehem. I'm not sure. But her return caused no small stir. And Naomi enters into that conversation, and she wants her name changed. Don't call me Naomi. Don't call me pleasant. Call me Mara. Call me bitter. Wow. Okay. Why? Well, the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full. The Lord has brought me back empty. Again, wrong thinking, Naomi. You're not empty. But who's going to confront her at that point? She buried 3 men in Moab. The pain is deep. They can at least see that. And it's not like bringing back a Moabite daughter-in-law was exactly something that was going to be a matter of rejoicing. And again, there was conflict in the history of those two nations. Her life is bitter. God is the one who has made it so. And so she says God has been a witness against her. He is the one who has brought trouble upon her. And once again, her theology is a mixture of right statements and wrong. As I said, who's going to stand up to her and say her life has not been bitter? Surely even returning to the land of Bethlehem brought mixed emotions for her. She would remember all the more the good times when life used to be full. when she was married, when she had 2 growing sons. But was she truly empty? Maybe almost so, humanly speaking, but her life was not hopeless. God had brought back a Moabite convert with her. In fact, just looking at the big picture, it's amazing to think of what God did to bring Ruth to the land of Israel. God had not brought her back empty. And though there was certainly deep grief and deep pain, she came back with a loving, devoted, loyal daughter-in-law as well. As we are left with the questions about Naomi, the chapter concludes with an interesting statement. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. From a human perspective, maybe this was coincidental, maybe it was intentional on Naomi's part. But as we will continue in the coming weeks, we'll see that God was carrying out an amazing plan. And this was just one more part of it. We conclude our time in the Word this morning. Let's return to the theme of the chapter. Trusting in God's providence means accepting times of suffering from His hand. We see a little bit of Naomi's heart here. She was accepting, sort of. It's a great picture of how we are going through suffering as well. We accepted, sort of. Even the strongest believers falter at times while going through extreme times of suffering. Job is perhaps the best example in the Old Testament. As we read earlier, even he believed that God was against him, and his faith in God was strong. In Naomi's blurred vision of the world around her, she almost missed the faith that was present in her daughter-in-law. She almost sent a believer alone back to a foreign land. She tried to push away somebody who was committed to being faithful to her and to the true God. Such was the depth of her pain and the blurring of her vision. She had a very compromised view of God and His actions towards her. So I'd like to share at the closing here, in times of suffering, consider the following 4 principles. Here's the glorious thing. Already in this story, God did not back away. God did not back away. He did not allow Naomi to get what she wanted in the moment. She wanted to be alone. God gave her Ruth. God does not back away from His hurting people. Isn't that a wonderful thing? God does not back away from His hurting people. Cling to that truth. Now, our faith was imperfect. That's not good. But the reality is that we often draw conclusions about life that are wrong in one way or the other. God continues to show His love towards this broken child of His. He knew what Naomi needed. God knows what you need. His way is best. Important principle. Are you in pain? Has the suffering in this life been too intense for too long? Maybe you've identified what you need now. Be careful. God knows what you need. If anything, trust in your view of life right now, even less. Trust in the God who sees all, who knows all, and is in every way and in every step faithful towards His will. Don't trust yourself. Trust God. Number 4, even though Naomi's view of life needed correction, by God's grace she was repenting of her time away from the land of Israel, and in some ways away from God. And in her weakness and in her broken ways, she was returning to God. It is always right to return to God. It is always right to return to God. Well, her thinking wasn't all put together. It is always right to return to God. In your weakness, in your brokenness, in whatever you have been compromised in whatever sin you have gone towards, it is always right to return to God. He is the one that is perfect. And the day that we start thinking that God expects us to be perfect before we come to Him. We have greatly misunderstood Him. If you suffered greatly in this life, perhaps you're even in the middle of great suffering right now, there's an incredibly important example in this chapter of Ruth. It's the example of returning to God. Bring all your uncertainties, bring all your pain, all your conclusions about life and about God Himself. Don't make the mistake of turning from Him. Don't make the mistake of believing you have to figure everything out before returning to God. In your weakness, in your pain, in your loss, in your confusion, trust in God. And please know, if any of you are at the stage where life has truly overwhelmed you, you're having trouble seeing up from down, there are others here who care. We want to be a church family that walks through these kinds of things together. Come talk to me after the service in the back, or find somebody else that you know and you trust. Say, hey, can we meet sometime this week? I need some help. That's humbling to do that. I'm not saying that if you do that step, then life will be perfect for you afterwards. In fact, often as we start taking those steps of repentance, life doesn't exactly get easy. It's more difficult sometimes. But I hope and pray that we as a church family, our church family that wants to walk through these difficult times together. Not perfectly, but for God's glory. I'd like to end just by reading two short psalms. We were recently in these psalms together on Wednesday night. God has been using them to build heart. Psalm 42 and 43. As the deer pants for the flowing stream, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all day long, where's your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul. I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God, with glad shouts and songs of praise, and a multitude keeping festival. Why are you cast down, my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me, hoping God? For I shall again praise Him, my salvation and my God. My soul is cast down within me, therefore I remember you from the land of Jordan and of Hermon, from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep at the roaring of your waterfalls. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands His steadfast love, and at night His song is with me, a prayer to the God of my life. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? As with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? Why are you cast down on my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise Him, my salvation and my God. Vindicate me, O God, and defend my cause against an ungodly people. From the deceitful and the unjust man, deliver me, for you are the God in whom I take refuge. Why have you rejected me? Why do I go about mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? Send out your light and your truth. Let them lead me. Let them bring me to your holy hill and to your dwelling. Then I will go to the altar of God, to God my exceeding joy, and I will praise you with the lyre, O God, my God. Why are you cast down on my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise Him, my salvation and my God. Let's pray. God, pain touches us all. But in your wisdom, you have brought some of us to extreme times of pain, of difficulty. God, we pray for those among us, whether that time was 20 years ago and still they wrestle with it, or whether it is currently taking place. We pray that they would see you rightly, that they would trust in you, in your steadfast love towards all of your people, including them. That They would cling to you in their weakness, in their failures, in their uncertainties, in their confusion. Grant them faith to endure. Thank you for this wonderful chapter, this chapter of difficulty and hurt and pain and loss, but also the chapter of loyalty, of love, and of your wisdom. Teach us, we pray. Draw us ever nearer to you. And may we see signs, just glimpses, of what we will one day see in so much more fullness and glory. Your wisdom, your control, your plan, that will show that you are like no one else. In Jesus' name, amen.